I released a video earlier this week about the 3.6 beta version of Elementor, and part of that was the new container element. Now, a lot of people asked in the comment section if I create a video to show you how to get started using the container, and that's exactly what this video is all about. So the container element, what exactly is it? Well, previously when we've been creating any kind of design with Elementor, we've been using sections and inner sections and columns and rows and all those kinds of things. And while it's been a relatively easy way of working, it does have one massive downside, and that is the sheer amount of code that's generated just to put something as simple as a title inside a section onto your page. Well, this is where the new container element, which is using the Flexbox model, comes in. It reduces the amount of code behind it, but also has a massive knock-on effect that it gives us a much more flexible system for creating our designs. Now, in this video today, I'm going to give you a starting guide. This is not going to be something that's going to go into huge amounts of detail how to create really complex designs. I'm going to take a practical example and show you how the majority of the tools that you're going to be using on a daily basis when you start working with the container element, how they all work. Now, before you start getting worried and think, well, what happens when the container element comes in? Or all my design is going to be out the window and I have to rebuild everything? No, you're not. The simple fact is that the existing way of working with Elementor, which we'll call the legacy way, will stay. You can carry on working that way, but you won't see those options available when you're creating new designs. And also, if you want to convert over from the existing way to the new container, once this is released, you'll have a convert option, which allows you to convert a page or just different sections on a page. I've covered this in its own dedicated video, and I'll link that down in the description below. Okay, so with all of that out of the way, let's take a look at how we can get started using the container. So what I'm going to do is we're going to go ahead and make sure that this is enabled. Now, I've got the Elementor dev version, but you can have the Elementor beta installed. It'll do pretty much the same thing. The main caveat here is do not use this feature on a live production site. If you want to test this out on a demonstration server, a test website, something you don't mind messing up, great. Live production sites, do not use it. That caveat out of the way, let's go ahead into the Elementor settings section. And inside the settings, we're going to make sure we go to the experiments tab. And inside there, we're going to scroll through until we find the option for container and make sure that's set to active. Providing you've done that and you hit the save option at the bottom, you're good to go. So now with that done, let's go ahead and create a new page. Let's just call this container. And let's just save our draft. We'll open this up now with Elementor to start working. Okay, so this is the design. Let's get rid of that title at the top, and let's actually get rid of all the elements on the page, all those distractions. So we'll set this to be the Elementor canvas. So we end up with just a blank document to work with. Okay, I'm going to keep the navigator up on the right-hand side because I want to show you various different things inside there, which just makes it easier to see what I'm talking about. Now, you take a look, you can see we've got the container element now over on the left-hand side with our widgets. We've also lost the option to add a new section and also inner sections. The container overrides all of that. Now, let's go ahead and take a look. If we open up one of the pre-designed templates, we'll start with a block. Now, at the time of recording, these are still using that original way of working, creating designs. It's not using the container. So this is a good way for me to demonstrate the differences. Let's take this example. Let's insert this into our design. And you can see now, if we take a look at this on the right-hand side of the navigator, we've got the traditional section. Open that up, and inside there, we've now got multiple columns. And inside each of those columns, we've got various different widgets, text, images, those kinds of things. Nothing you haven't already done. And looking at a layout like this, it's not overly complex, but it does have a few challenges that require a little bit of a hacky way around to get it to lay out the way that you want. Using the Flex model, we can do this kind of thing much easier. So what we're going to do is we're going to remove this from here. We'll delete it, and we're going to create something very similar. This will give me a good way of demonstrating how all these different features of the container works. Now, we can go ahead and drag and drop a container element into our design, and you can see if we do that, we now get the container over in the navigator on the right-hand side. And if you open that up, it's completely empty. There's nothing inside there right now. Let's get rid of that for now. What we can do to make things even easier is we can click to add a new container in. This has replaced that original way of working. We select that, and you can see now we get what looks a very similar kind of layout or set of tools to what we had with the sections, but we have some more complex designs. So while we've got the single section and the dual columns and triple columns and those kinds of things, we also have these more intricate designs, which we can use as a starting point. For now, we're going to leave those as they are. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this 3-column layout. We're going to select that, And now you take a look on the right hand side, you can see we've still got the container. But if we open that up, we now have 3 containers nested inside that parent container. To make life easier, let's rename the parent container to exactly that, parent. That's going to mean that you can see exactly what's going on just a little bit easier. Okay, so with the parent set up and everything laid out the way that we want, let's take a look at what's changed on the left-hand side. Now, if you saw the earlier videos on where I covered this probably about 3 months ago, things have changed since then. So if you looked at that video and you're looking at this and you're thinking, this isn't quite the same, Paul, let me show you what's changed. We now have the container element over the left-hand side. And we've also got this new tab called Items. So the container is very similar to what you have with the sections. You can set things up to be boxed or full width. You can adjust the width, the minimum height, set the overflow, the HTML tag that's going to be used, all those kinds of things. The items is where the magic kind of happens now, though. If we open this up, you can see we now have new options available inside here over what we would have had with the sections. We've got the direction, the align items, the justify content, and the elements gap. I'm going to take a look at those now in order. Before we do though, let's go back to our container and let's just make this a little bit higher. And you'll see why in a moment. We need to be able to have some horizontal and vertical space to be able to see what's going on. So I'm going to set this to something like 900 pixels high. And you'll notice that what happens is each of our containers now occupies the full height of that entire parent container. And this is quite useful to see because that's the entire amount of space that we've got to play with inside there. Now, when we've got any of these available to us, we can select them. And now we can edit just that container that sits inside the parent, a nested container. This is great because now what we can do is we can adjust the width of this. So you can see this is set to 33 1/3 because these are equal columns. But if we wanted to, we can easily come in and start adjusting that. And you see the other two will compensate for it. So we can set that to be 60, for example. So now the first column is taking up a 60% width of the overall 100% available, meaning that the other two columns have 20% each. But if you wanted to, you could easily select any of those columns and adjust the figures accordingly. Let's just reset that to what it was. So now we've got equal columns to work with. So what we can do now, let's go ahead and drop something into these so we can see what's going to happen when we change things up. What we'll do is we're going to keep it really simple. We're going to drop in an image. We'll just select this and we'll just set an image to work with. So I'm going to just grab this image. I'll duplicate this 2 times. And we'll position those in the respective columns and just quickly change those images for something else. So what we have now is we've got a parent container, and inside there we've got 3 individual nested containers, and inside each one of those containers we have an image widget. So we've got a good starting point. So let's go ahead and make sure that our parent container is selected. With that selected, we're going to go and take a look at the items tab, because this is now where we can start to see how things work. First of all, let's take a look at the direction. You can see at the moment this is set to be a row, and what a row does is it basically aligns everything horizontally. So now we've got these 3 columns and the content is lined up side by side. If we switch this over to a column, it'll stack them vertically. So now they stack on top of each other, which is more what you would have seen in the original way of working, where everything, whenever you added a new widget, it would always go on top. So this immediately makes the whole process of doing things like laying things out just much easier. We've also got the option for reversed row and reversed column. So if we go back to row, you can see that the umbrella picture is the first one, and the guy stood by the bridge or whatever that kind of building thing is the last one. Where if we choose reversed row, it flips those around now to be the opposite way around. Same thing goes if we choose the column. You can see the umbrella is the first one. If we choose to reverse that, it now flips those the opposite way. Now, your mileage may vary as to whether you'd want to use these, but the benefit of this comes in when you start looking at the fact you can set these up to be different based upon the different devices. So set this back to be a row. Let's go into desktop, and you see that's now set to be a row. If we change this over and go to tablet view, and we set this to be row reversed, we've reversed it. So now, if we go back into desktop, it's the original order. If we switch things over into tablet view, it's the reversed order. So you can get quite creative with your layouts and your designs inside here using these kinds of tools. So there's a lot of use cases for why this can be beneficial. Let's uncheck that and even go back to the default and switch things back into our desktop view. Okay, so now we've seen how the row works and how we can set reverse rows and reverse columns. The align items does exactly as its name suggests. It allows us to choose how we align them inside this particular parent container. So we can see at the moment, everything is aligned at the top, which is called Flex Start. Now you'll notice that there's nothing selected in these aligned items, but that doesn't mean anything. The Flex Start is the first option and is the default option. So the first icon you'll see in these, whether it's the direction, the align items, or the justify, whether there's nothing selected, the first item is the default item. Just to bear that in mind. So if we choose Flex Start, nothing will happen because it's already using that default value. We choose Flex Center, it now positions them in the center of the parent container. If we choose Flex End, it sets to the bottom. And if we do the stretch, nothing will really happen because we don't have any space to allow these to stretch. So that's not really going to have much of a change on here. And it kind of looks in this example exactly the same as the Flex Start. So now, if we switch this over to the column, you'll see everything now reverses. So we no longer have these going across the horizontal line. We now have them going vertically. So at the moment, you can see that our Flex Start means that it butts up to the left-hand side. If we set this to be Flex Center, it's now the center. If we set this to be Flex End, you can see it's the end. And the same thing goes, the Flex Stretch isn't going to do anything because we have no extra space. So let's take a look at how the justify content works next. What we're going to do first of all is to give us a little bit of breathing space here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make each of these images just a little bit smaller. And you'll see why in a moment. This isn't important. This just means for the amount of screen space that I've got, it just makes my life a little easier. So we're going to set these to be 300 pixels. And we do exactly the same. So I'm just going to copy that from there and we'll paste that style. And we'll paste that style on there. Let's go back to our parent container and let's just set this to be a column. Okay, so we still don't have a huge amount of room at the bottom. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come to container and I'm going to make the minimum height even higher, just so we can see that we've got some space, some breathing room. So you can see this blue line is the bottom of our container. So with that being chosen, let's go back to our items. And this time we can choose the options for our justify content. So if we choose this to be justify Flex Start, it sits at the top, so you won't see any difference. If we say center, it now centers this vertically. So you can see we've got space at the bottom, space at the top. Flex End pushes everything to the bottom. But what's more important are these three final options. Space between will put equal space between the items, but nothing at the top and the bottom of the container. Choose the space around, we'll put equal space top and bottom, so it gives you breathing room all the way around. And then you've got space evenly, which as its name would suggest, it will give you even spacing between each of the different elements, whether they're widgets or internal containers. So you can see that we can set these up, we can combine them together, and we can align everything the way that we want. If we switch this over to a row, you can see now the options are slightly different. Everything kind of flips and reverses. So I hope that makes sense to what's going on. Next up, we've got the elements gap. Now at the moment, you can see there's zero gap, but because we've got these laid out, we've got explicit sizes on our images, there's already a natural gap based upon things. But let's just make sure that you can see what I'm talking about. Let's set the width on this to be a little smaller, so everything now butts up a little bit closer to each other. Now what we can do is we can come in here and we can use this to put spacing around any of the widgets, any of the elements inside our design, whether they're inserted images and widgets and so on, or if they're containers that are nested inside a parent container. So I hope that makes a little bit of sense. So you've got lots of options now to how you lay things out. Let's set that back to its default values and let's go back to our container. Let's set this down to 100%. So we've got some breathing space around everything. Okay, so now that we've seen how to do this, you've also got the options then for your overflow and your HTML tag. So when you create any of your containers, you can select them and you can set the relevant HTML tag. And obviously, if you're setting up things like using this to create your headers and footers, set your HTML tag to be the relevant header, footer, main, and so on. Now, one feature inside here is actually quite useful. If we select, for example, this image and we'll select its container, we'll select it, we can go in and we can set this to be an A tag. So now what that means is that entire area becomes clickable. So when you've had the options before to create clickable sections as opposed to a clickable widget, this will allow you to do it very easily. So what you need to do then is just simply drop in your link. If you want to set any link options, like opening a new window, for example, or no follow, you can do that inside here as well. Let's just quickly publish that, and I can demonstrate this to show you what I'm talking about. Just click to preview, and now you can see this entire container is clickable, whereas the other ones and not. So you can create designs and you might have an entire advert or an entire complex layout that you want the entire thing to be clickable, where you can just set the container for that to be clickable and everything inside it is a clickable item. So pretty cool and really useful in a lot of different scenarios. Let's just remove that from there and just set that back to be default for now. Okay, so we've seen how to get started with some of the basics. Let's take this another step further by taking a look at how we start to recreate that layout. So the first thing I want to do is just go ahead, set the background color on this. So we're going to come into our styles, set the background to be black, and we're just going to make sure that everything else is reset back to its original value. So there we are. Now we've reset everything back to its starting point, and we're ready to start taking a look at those options, how to build something like this out. So what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that we can see how we can work with the different containers that are nested inside a container, because each one of these has its own set of options, and then inside there every one of the widgets have their own set of options that can all interact with the Flexbox. So let's first of all take a look at this nested container and let me demonstrate what I'm talking about. Let's select it. Let's go to the items, and all those options are available. So currently this is being treated like a column. So if we go ahead and we add something like a heading in, you can see that positions it underneath or above, depending upon where we want to stack this. And it's treated like a column. If we go back and select that container one more time, go to our items and choose to set it as a row, you can see now it puts them side by side. So it already gives us more creative flexibility. We can reverse these. We have a reversed row, so it'll do exactly as its name suggests. But you'll notice that it doesn't have any impact upon the parent container or any of the other nested containers inside there. If you want to reverse the column, we can do that as well. You can do all of this as well based upon the type of device you're viewing it on, so fully responsive designs. So if you find you have layouts that you need to switch things around, you can use these reverse columns and reverse rows to get creative to make sure that everything looks good on all kinds of devices. Again, just another one of those ways of making life just a little easier. Let's set this back to be a column. Now we've also got the options then to align things. Now obviously the alignment's not going to make any difference on this because this is taking up the full width of this particular container. However, the justify content options will. So for example, if we say space evenly, you can see now we get even spacing between the actual widgets that are displayed inside this section. We can come over to a different section, for example this last one, and we can choose a different set of options. So we can say we want this to be aligned to the bottom. And now you can see we can start to create that same kind of look and feel without messing around too much. It's all much more visual in how we can set things up. And you can still use margins and padding and spacing and all those kinds of things if you want to. All those options are still available to you. Okay, now before I go any further with this and we start to actually refine the design and put all the elements together, there's one more thing I want to show you. Let's just reset this first column to make sure that everything is set up. I keep referring to it as a column, this container, I should be saying, just for clarity. Okay, so now we've got those. Let's set this back to be a row so we can put things side by side. What we're going to do now is we're going to select this little text widget. We'll select that and go into advanced. Bear in mind, we don't have the container selected, we just have the widget. You'll see we now have some extra options underneath the advanced section for alignment, order, size, and so on. So the align self will affect the alignment inside the container of only that specific widget. So for example, if I wanted the image to stay at the top, but I wanted this text inside that container to sit at the bottom, I can choose flex end, and now that sits at the bottom. So these are the kinds of things that would have been more complicated to do previously with CSS and all those kinds of things. The Flexbox model with the container makes it so much easier to work with. Let's set that back to what it was. You've also then got options for the order of things. So you can change the order of various different things. And this can work on an item, a widget, or it can work on a container. So for example, if we choose this one and we say we want to set this order to be first, you can see that now positions it first inside there. If we want it to be last, you can see, or end, it'll go to the last. But you can also, if you've got multiple different items inside here, you can go ahead and insert your own custom values. So you could have 3 images and you could change the order of those very easily. And again, this is all controllable across all the different responsive designs. So you can get as creative as you want with different kinds of layouts, different kinds of positioning, all those kinds of things. Pretty cool. You can also go ahead and create custom order. So if you use the last option, customize it to your heart's content to set it up exactly as you want. You've also then got options for sizing. Now this isn't a particularly great example for how you can use this, but you can use these options to make things get bigger or smaller, by using the grow or the shrink, or you can create your own custom flex grow or flex shrink options, again, globally or based upon the different responsive designs. So let me just give you a quick example of how that flex grow kind of works. We'll choose the image because it's a much more visual example. Select that. And again, you can see we've got the same advanced options inside here. So everywhere has these advanced options to work with the Flexbox model. So it's really cool. So what we can do is we can come into a size and we can say we want to make this bigger. Flex grow, and boom, you can see it now becomes bigger. Flex shrink, puts it back. Or like I said, you can create your own custom flex grow. This is great if you want to create layouts for things like pricing matrices, or for example, you've got sort of like multiple columns and you wanted one to be bigger without having to mess about with going in and setting up physical sizes and percentages for the different containers. You've got lots of options, and like I say, the flex model just makes that whole process a lot easier. Let's then remove that. So you've got nothing going on there, everything set back to what it was. And we'll also go ahead and set this back to be a column. And there we go. We're almost there. Let's go ahead and adjust a few elements inside here. Let's grab this heading, position that above our image. And what we're going to do is just make sure you've got this selected. Go to our items. Let's go ahead and change this to be a different color. We'll set this to be white. We'll adjust the size on this a little bit, so it occupies a little bit more space. There we go. And what we're going to do is we're going to come in, we're just going to grab a text editor. We'll drop that underneath there, and we'll do exactly the same thing over on this side. Okay, so we've now got the basic parts of the design layout that we took a look at earlier. So now what we can do is we can start to create things and lay things out. So we can select this entire container, and we can make changes to that, or we can just grab any of the elements inside it and make changes. So for example, with this image, we're going to select this. We're going to add a little bit of padding around it. We're also going to come into the transform options, choose hover, and we're going to choose the option for scale. And we're going to set this to just scale up to about 1% bigger, or 1/10 bigger. You see now when we mouse over, we get the effect that's in the actual sample that we're working with. So now what I can do is I can simply copy that from there, and we can just paste that same effect to each of these others. So paste our styles. Now what we're going to do is going to select this first one, and we're going to just add in a little bit of spacing around this. So again, we'll do 25 on the top, 25 right, 25 left. There we go. And we'll do exactly the same on this one on the right hand side as well. So there's the basics of our design put together. Now we can go ahead, select this in a container. We'll select that, come into our item section. We'll set this to be aligned to the center. We'll leave this one at the top, and we're going to do exactly the same for this one. We're going to select this entire container, come into our items, and we're going to set this to be aligned to the bottom as well. And you can see this kind of gives us that similar effect. And if you want to adjust anything on there, you can do just that. But now what we've created using the Flexbox model in a much quicker fashion is the same kind of layout with no intersections, less code, less bloat, all those kinds of things that have kind of been stripped out to make life a lot easier. We've got full control over all the different kind of responsive modes that we want. But that's just a basic overview of how to get started using the new container element in the forthcoming release of Elementor. Hopefully this will give you some confidence to get stuck in and start experimenting yourself. But please just remember that if you do, you only do this on a test site, not on a live production site. If you've got any comments, questions, or feedback, leave those in the comment section below. All applicable links are in the description. My name is Paul C. This is WPTuts, and until next time, take care.